Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Leitch, and I'm the chair of the Motion Picture Production Industry Association of BC. Once again, I would like to welcome you on behalf of the MPPIA Board of Directors, our members, and this information session to update on the safe return to work of British Columbia's motion picture industry. We wish to acknowledge those nations on whose lands we live and work. This event will have us gathering in a virtual format with people from across BC. Given that land acknowledgements are specific to each region, we urge each of our participants to visit the Native Land Digital website to identify on which First Nations territories you are located. COVID-19 pandemic has been a devastating impact for those individuals and families whose health has been impacted. We would like to recognize the tremendous contribution that the healthcare workers, first responders, and all those that have contributed to keeping essential services running have made to our daily lives, and we are truly grateful for their dedication and service. We are also proud of the work that the BC provincial government has done in implementing informed and well thought out health and safety policies and protocols that have been supported by the majority of British Columbians. This will undoubtedly allow us to return to the new normal much faster if we continue to stay the course. Like many industries globally, BC's motion picture industry has been severely impacted and almost come to a halt over the last 2 months. Thousands of industry workers have been out of work, and the majority of us want to get back as soon as it is safe to do so. The Provincial Health Authority is now taking steps to safely reopen BC's economy, and through the leadership of Creative BC, the industry will be submitting a safe return to work plan for approval of the Provincial Health Authority within the coming weeks, which will be a major step towards a return to work. There's been a lot of work done to prepare for the safe return to work by the employees, unions and guilds, the CMPA, the MPA, the AMPTP, MPPIA, Actsafe, WorkSafe, and of course, the Provincial Health Authority. As I've said before in BC, one of our competitive strengths is a strong industry collaboration between all the industry stakeholders. It is my pleasure today to introduce our panel as follows. Marnie Orr, BC Film Commissioner and Director of Production Services for Creative BC. Laurie Ward, Secretary Treasurer and Principal Officer of Teamsters Local Union number 155. Laurie Stewart, UBCP Actors Health and Safety Performers Advocate. Anand, Kanna, Actsafe Safety Association Manager, Motion Picture Programs and Services. Kendrie Upton, Executive Director, Directors Guild of Canada, BC Branch. Geoff Teoli, Branch Manager, Film and Special Events, City of Vancouver. Don Thompson, Executive Vice President and Founder at Finale Post-Production. Garin, Josey, Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, William F. White. And Shawn Williamson, award-winning film and television producer. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our first panelist, the Director of Production Services for Creative BC and our BC Film Commissioner, Marnie Orr. Marnie.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to first speak to your reference to the announcement by the Premier, and that Creative BC has been tasked to facilitate motion picture industry as it defines its restart plan in reference to his announcement on Wednesday. This is going to be, as always in British Columbia, a coordinated effort through established government industry collaborations, including the Actsafe Motion Picture Standing Committee, the body that is comprised of BC's industry stakeholders, including representatives of the major studio employers, AMPTP, CMPA, and unions and guilds. Film production is listed as part of a careful restart in phase 3 of the government's plan, and this will be a gradual dialing up of activity. Online, BC's restart plan notes domestic production specifically. This is reflective of government's expectation that domestic productions may have all of the workforce necessary already in the province. However, I can clarify that this reference is not intended to be restrictive. The province welcomes all production in BC back, providing it has developed the required criteria for a safe workplace and operating guidelines that have been approved by WorkSafe BC and the Provincial Health Authority. Visit our website, creativebc.com, for more information about this clarification and for more information on next steps, which will answer the question that still remains, when are we getting back to work? So we know there's a number of things that need to happen, and I'm going to speak to 3 of them today. Number 1, Creative BC has been tasked to facilitate for the motion picture industry to develop a set of high-level guidelines for how businesses and organizations in our sector can operate safely during the pandemic. The BC Motion Picture Industry COVID-19 Best Practices Coalition has been formed, and I'm going to be supporting the coalition to design and submit this document to the province via the ministry that oversees our sector, the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture. Many of my colleagues on the panel today are also on this coalition. It's important to note that the document will contain recommended practices rather than prescriptive measures. Number 2, like all other industries in BC, we will seek approval by the province of that document which the coalition will put forward. This will be acknowledgement of our best practices and of the document from WorkSafe BC and the Provincial Health Authority. This will be the same process that other industries from construction to hospitality or retail are following to establish high-level best practices and recommendations for safe job sites. We are aware how important this document will be for all industry stakeholders for reference, particularly that it will be an external-facing document to use for municipal film offices, provincial permitting agencies, and individual productions. Number 3, this approved best practices document will be posted and shared broadly. It will be used freely by labor organizations, independent producers, employers, production studios, suppliers, and others. And it will be used as a tool by which anyone in physical production, we also have post representation on the coalition as well, that can define their independent and cascading plans, including distinctive considerations at the departmental level. It will also be used as a tool to help facilitate the conversations that are happening now all around the world in the film industry that are taking place between employers and unions that are taking necessary and important steps to ensure health and safety protocols for job sites to ensure the safety of employees. We will continue to update our website as we work through the framework of this document. I also wanted to talk about the other work Creative BC is doing. We're doing constant collaboration with our regional film commissions throughout British Columbia, and I just wanted to mention them. Joan Miller at North Island, Kathleen Gilbert at Vancouver Island South Film Commission, Victoria Weller with Thompson Nicola, Clint Fraser at Northern BC Tourism, John Summerland with the Okanagan, Geoff Moore at Caribou Coast Tourism, Kyle Deering at Columbia Shuswap, and Joanna Murata in the Kootenays. They are a huge part of the framework that ensures BC is the place to film. And we're also working very closely with the Motion Picture Association and our clients, the studios that work here in British Columbia, which are many. We possess great relationships with them all, and we are working with them daily, from Warner Brothers to Netflix and beyond, to CMPA and all of our domestic producers and production companies in BC. We're also working closely with the film commissions across Canada and my counterpart, Justin Cutler, Ontario Creates, as well as film commissions in the other provinces, to make sure we're collaborating, not recreating the wheel, and ensuring consistency across Canada. Continued work, as we always do at Creative BC, with our municipal film offices and the municipalities specifically, 35 of them from Hope to Pemberton. I want to mention that we had a great call yesterday as part of the City of Vancouver Motion Picture Leadership Group that was led by David Shepherd, the City of Vancouver Film Commissioner, and Jeff Teoli with the City of Vancouver Film Office, who's also joining me on this panel. And it's another great collaborative partnership and that we feel very grateful for. We're also working, of course, with the Directors Guild, Kendrie, and the Commercial Producers Association and location managers on what it's going to look like when we go back to work and the communication that we can use to make sure that we have a plan as we're out in locations, businesses, homes, civic properties, etc. I also want to talk about, as some of you may know, about Real Green, and they've switched to online training with the Carbon Literacy course and Carbon Calculator course led by the fabulous Ina Harris and Julie Bernard from Creative BC. They've done a lot of great work to make sure that you guys can stay home and learn about sustainability. They're also looking at what new best practices will be as we start to go back to work and how changes to our activities can help support the environment. And I just want to finish by saying that the Film Commission at Creative BC continues to receive inquiries about filming in British Columbia. Our production services team has continued throughout the last 8 weeks to receive scripts from LA and elsewhere. So we're putting together location packages. Producers want to film in BC. We're getting lots of inquiries, and we're communicating with them about how we're dialing back up in BC safely. We know there's a lot of work to be done now, and we're all going to get there together. I'm going to stop there because I know there's a lot of information that all my other panelists want to share, and I'm very grateful and honored to hand over the screen to my colleague Laurie Ward with Teamsters 155.
Thank you, Marnie. Good afternoon, and thank you, Marnie, for all your hard work and everyone's hard work throughout this industry for all that is being done behind the scenes, including, of course, Creative BC and the provincial government. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on adapting to the new normal, which could be expanded to adapting to the new normal that we don't know quite what it looks like yet, but we are working on it tirelessly. By the way, if I look like I'm reading this, I am. It's for the benefit of all of you, as I tend to rant after a while. Those that know me will attest to that fact. I would like to say that I've been very proud and grateful to have been part of this film industry in numerous capacities for over 30 years, starting humbly as a production assistant to today as a often humbled union leader. Today, I want to offer only my perspective, not as criticism, and to use the term worker in the broader sense. Members of the Teamsters, along with other unions and non-union workers in this industry, are very resilient and talented, bringing unique skills to this very unique industry. In my opinion, there are still more questions than answers at this point, in spite of the numerous guidelines floating out there from independent studios and film commissions in countries like Denmark and New Zealand and Australia and Sweden and others. None of them, to my knowledge, being agreed upon by labor organizations or possibly even health authorities. Many fit rather comfortably in the commercial film market, possibly, but that's not my expertise. These guidelines have been posted and distributed and have caused a fair amount of angst out there amongst those workers eager to return to work. The major studios and US labor organizations are also in the process of developing guidelines from guidance from an epidemiologist is part of the process, and so it should be, in my opinion. No one should rush back only to have a serious outbreak. Domestic productions are not. I'm fairly confident the major studios won't resume production in haste in Hollywood or here in BC until they are confident they can do so without risk to their assets and employees. The new normal is a word that can be very intimidating for all of us, even though workers in the film industry that are quite accustomed to an abnormal work life. Workers in our industry are very resilient and have committed to the terms and conditions that are very demanding of them. There are no guarantees of work, although, as my friend Phil Clapwick pointed out last week, in the past 5 years, work has been in abundance. We have many members that left a more secure job with seniority and better benefits to the lure of this industry, as many had done before them. Those that have been around for a decade or two have experienced slow periods where there wasn't much work, but never so sudden and so complete as during this pandemic. The business in the past has fared well during recessions, and in the States, even during a depression. The film industry can be very rewarding if it doesn't overwhelm you. So hang in there for all those who have only been with us for the past 5 years. You'll be needed. There's an old saying that you don't know you've had a holiday in the film industry until it's over. That's because you were just unemployed waiting for the next gig. It's a gig mentality, and this is by no means a holiday. Contractually, our workers are guaranteed a day's work or more likely as a head of department a week's work under the deal memo. It is normal to go to work sick to show their resilience and then be coaxed to go home by their fellow workers and or head of department, showing that they really were sick and could be relied on as long as they didn't get sick too often. They're doing that with no sick time pay, no bereavement benefits, no seniority. All this and more for the chance to work in a lucrative, exciting film industry that provides both financial rewards based on an abundance of overtime premium pay and a passion for being part of the movie making process. Peter Hyams once told an old friend of mine who was his driver that we are all filmmakers because we are all part of the filmmaking process. That's why we're all here today, trying to assure everyone that we will return, and returning safely is the key operative word. For a moment, I'd like to address a major concern regarding everyone's mental health during these difficult times. A couple of years ago, all 6 film unions created an initiative called Call Time Mental Health, which is now a registered society. The goal was, and still is, to change the culture of mental health and addiction in the film industry. This was triggered by the opioid crisis originally, and awareness of the toll, the stress this industry has on workers' mental health. Be strong and don't look weak is a go-to move in this demanding industry. Being able to talk about your emotional state during a 12 to 20-hour workday is what we believe is crucial to survival. Call Time Mental Health website is resource-based to help direct those in need of help or wanting to help. Please feel free to check it out, calltimementalhealth.com. There's an amazing testimonial video that is done by our local filmmakers. During these times, it's a chance to hopefully find someone to talk about how these current challenges is affecting you. Being one who has dealt with both of these conditions personally, I want to tell you, as expressed in the video by those brave souls that step forward on camera, is that you're not alone. So back to the new normal. Out of this pandemic, my hope is that production companies develop a more reasonable workday schedule that will continue beyond this 18-month pandemic that we're experiencing. Schedules will, of course, expand past the restrictiveness of the pandemic protocols one day, but we should come out of this with a more sustainable work environment on a more compassionate level. Reopen, rebuild, and reimagine. The industry, in my opinion, had gotten out of control. The demands on everyone, thanks in part to new technologies, have become overwhelming, unhealthy, and unsustainable. So as labor organizations, governmental bodies, vendors, and all those that have vested interest in this industry, we need to look at this industry with a new lens. It will look different. Many measures regarding safety protocols that will be put in place should stay after the all clear is declared. What we are talking about now is returning to work safely under the current conditions, acknowledging that we are most likely only at the bottom of the 3rd inning regarding this pandemic, according to the science. We're currently communicating with and including the expertise of our membership, gathering feedback and strategizing on next steps and recommendations to eliminate risks for all cast and crew. Measures put in place by government bodies, including health authorities, set policies for the safety of the public. Regulations put in place by WorkSafe BC are for the safety of the workers. Responsibility for a safe work environment and or honoring a collective agreement is the responsibility and obligation of the employer. The obligations of the members' safety and contractual rights under a collective agreement are the responsibility of the unions and its members. All are a very big challenge going forward. I believe we can get through this if we're all pulling in the same direction. With that, I want to encourage everyone listening to hang in there, be patient, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and forgive yourself when you fall short. Oh, and if possible, be kind to your local union representatives. Thank you for your time today. I'd like to pass it on to Laurie Stewart, UBC ACTRA. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorrie. Good afternoon, everybody. Those of you that don't know me, I am Laurie Stewart. I'm the Health and Safety Performer Advocate for UBCP ACTRA for the past 5 years. I currently sit on the Actsafe Motion Picture Standing Committee and the BC Federation of Labor Occupational Health and Safety Committee, representing the film unions there. I've also been a member of UBCP ACTRA since 1994 as a working stunt performer. I just want to give you a little bit of a high-level overview on what we're working on for our members in the broader community, and also some of the challenges that our performing community is facing. So as Marnie previously mentioned, UBCP ACTRA is actively involved in the BC Coalition, and we continue to look forward to working with our, collaborate with our industry partners on making a Made in BC plan that'll work for all of us and get us back to work. Beyond the local BC involvement, I am working with ACTRA National on their Health and Safety Committee and advising ACTRA's National Executive Director in the 70+ member Canada COVID-19 Task Force. To the south of us, I'm in regular communications with SAG-AFTRA in Los Angeles to share developments, information, and resources between our organizations, which is proving to be very mutually beneficial. I think it's really important at this time to recognize, although working on film sets is similar throughout the world, and we all face similar challenges and hurdles right now, that returning to work during a pandemic is going to look very different globally. And as Laurie Ward just mentioned, certainly there's an abundance of guidelines and articles and protocols being posted from all over the world touting what their jurisdiction is going to do and coming back and restarting the film industry. Some of this information is fantastic, really good. Other stuff is very creative. And some of it is actually really, quite frankly, not helpful, practical, or going to work with our collective agreements, at least for us here in BC. So I think it's important, again, Laurie touched on this, that a lot of this information is creating some high levels of anxiety and stress and uncertainty for many film workers in BC and beyond, and rightly so. I mean, our members are very concerned about their future in the industry. There's many suggestions being proposed that directly impact their work opportunities, such as reducing the number of background performers and day players, restricting the hiring of senior performers, those over a certain age, restricting or eliminating stunt sequences. These are really unsettling things for and suggestions for our members to hear right now. I'd like to just take a moment and kind of remind everyone and reassure our members and the broader community that these articles and documents that we're constantly being bombarded with in the media are not the final version of what return to film work in British Columbia will look like. For now, let's sort of just look at them as ideas. Let's look at what's being suggested in different jurisdictions for sure, and 100%, let's take the good stuff, but then let's move on and forget the other stuff that just simply won't work here. Return to work guidelines will need to fit the laws, public health orders and regulations for each jurisdiction. So for example, we've had a lot of questions about the current border restrictions and the 14-day quarantine period for performers and other essential crew. Hurdles like this will remain in place until our public health officer deems it safe to change these orders. Further, WorkSafe BC, Actsafe, and our various levels of government will all have important roles to play, and any BC guidelines will also need to work for Canadian productions, low budget film work, commercials, US studio, and feature film productions. And then let's not forget our collective agreements. All of the film unions, that we have these protections in place, and they're more important now more than ever. We'll continue to enforce those hard-won protections on your behalf. We are also committed to moving forward with issues that are important to our membership, such as equity, inclusion, and work opportunities for our members. All of this, everything needs to come together, and it needs to come together for here, and it needs for BC. So let's all kind of take a big breath. We're all anxious to get going, but let's not get overwhelmed so much with what's happening out there. So digging a little deeper for our performers, some of the other steps that we are taking. Internally, UBCP ACTRA is working on a list of recommended best practices for performers in our new COVID-19 workplace reality. We are collecting these articles and guidelines from other countries and jurisdictions. We are collating them. We are pulling out the gold nuggets, those great ideas, those solutions that'll work for our performers when we consider the entire flow of your entire day on set, from arriving at Crew Park to leaving at the end of the day. Earlier this week, a survey was sent to select members of UBCP ACTRA that represent all performance categories in our union. This survey aims to spotlight the risks and challenges facing each department and specific performance categories to make sure we've got everything covered. Soon we'll be conducting virtual focus groups and getting more information and ideas and perspectives from our members, more gold nuggets. We're also reaching out to talent agents, intimacy coordinators for their valuable perspective in keeping performers safe and working. And finally, ACTRA National has just sent out a membership-wide survey across Canada to gauge members' opinions about the COVID-19 situation and concerns around returning to work for the different branches and provinces. So if you are a UBCP ACTRA member out there and you haven't done so yet, please take the time to do this survey. We really want to hear from you. To conclude, this is an incredibly challenging time that's morphing and changing rapidly. The pressure is on to get guidelines in place so we can get back to work as soon as possible. But of the utmost importance, we need to get this right, and we need to get this right the first time. We don't want a second take. We must ensure the safety of all performers and all our film family workers, and we are working hard to make sure that this is a reality for all of you. I'm confident that we will have a solid Made in BC solution in the near future, and our return to work journey in BC will begin. Thanks, and I'd like to pass the screen to Anand Kanna of Actsafe.
Thank you, Lorrie. As Lorrie mentioned, my name is Anand Kanna. I am the manager of motion picture programs and services for the Actsafe Safety Association. For those of you that might not be familiar with what Actsafe is, we're a nonprofit health and safety association that provides occupational health and safety resources, education, training, guidance, specifically to the motion picture, television, commercial, performing arts, and live event industries in British Columbia. Our sources of funding comes from those industries, the employers in those industries. Currently, in support of the industry, we are making more of our training available online, such as our popular motion picture general safety awareness online course, went online last year. And upcoming, we are shifting our motion picture safety for supervisors workshop to a virtual online delivery. In addition to that, we have started doing online chats, such as for the performing arts sector, What Would Don Do? Which is a great chat that he hosts every week, and I will soon be joining him with an Ask Anand session devoted to safety issues in the motion picture sector. One thing I want to stress is that Actsafe is not WorkSafe BC. Okay, we don't write the regulations. We don't have the authority to enforce the rules, but what we can do at Actsafe is we can certainly help employers and workers navigate through the rules. Okay, through our collaboration with the employers from the major Canadian producers, the US studios, all of the labor organizations that represent all industry workers in the province of British Columbia, Actsafe is able to produce guidance covering occupational health and safety best practices, policies, and procedures that can help employers ensure the safety of workers in BC's entertainment production industries. And no more is that important than right now with COVID-19. You've heard the cliche countless times before. I'm going to say it again, and it is true. We are truly in uncharted territory. No one in our generation has experienced an episode like this. And as such, nobody has a plan in their back pocket on how to return to operations. Actsafe's work with all of our stakeholders in the BC Motion Picture COVID-19 Best Practices Coalition will help in establishing a foundational framework for employers to use when drafting their return to production policies in a way that will continue to ensure workers' safety. Our role is to ensure that when drafting these documents, occupational health and safety standards are taken into account and that WorkSafe BC regulations and guidelines are met. It's still the employer's responsibility to have a policy in place that outlines their commitment to keeping workplaces safe from COVID-19 exposure. And this framework that the coalition is developing will go a long way in helping employers meet that obligation. The coalition consists of a lot of dedicated creative minds, knowledgeable about a wide range of production activities, from pre-production right through to post, but we can't do it all. Once that foundation is built and we move towards developing specific safe work protocols, input from the workers that perform those tasks will be vital, and we will seek their input. Uncharted territory. This will take time. This will be a process. And as we've done in the past 20 years, the guidance from Actsafe will provide the process that will ensure occupational health and safety standards are met, WorkSafe BC regulations and guidelines are adhered to, and this province remains the safest place in the world to produce motion pictures, television commercials, live events, and performing arts. Finally, I'd like to remind everyone to be kind to each other, look out for each other, and be safe. Short and sweet. Now, I'd like to turn things over to the Executive Director of the BC District Council, Kendrie Upton.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much, Anand. And thanks so much to MPPIA for letting me take part in this important event. And also to all of you who are joining us today. I see our number on the Zoom is around 700, and it's amazing to see so many people showing up. Aside from the massive attendance on these Zooms, which clearly tends to indicate that they're getting information out to those who need it. Personally, I truly believe that this type of engagement is absolutely key in bringing our community through this on a number of different levels. Last week, I shared some of what's been happening on the labor front, and clearly our members and their needs and concerns are still my primary concern at the DGC. But like so many of us, I wear many, many hats, and including that of board member at MPPIA, co-chair with Linda Hay of the MPPIA Equity and Inclusion Committee, as well as sitting on the Motion Picture Community Initiative, which is another subcommittee of MPPIA. So it's wearing some of these hats that I'm going to speak to you today. Because as you might imagine, all of these are being colored right now by the reality of COVID-19. I want to begin by echoing and adding to Laurie's comments around mental health and the impact that the situation around the virus is having on our community. As Lorrie said, our industry with its hours and many stressors can take a toll on workers. And as I was putting this together, I was reflecting on a series of focus groups that the DGC National conducted last year with members across the country to determine their mental fitness. And only 2% of those involved identified that they were thriving, 14% that said that they were succeeding. The rest fell into the categories of surviving, sluggish, and compromised. Our members often tell us that they experience symptoms of overwhelm and anxiety or even depression at the end of a production. During a show, they've been going millions of miles an hour, running on adrenaline and probably caffeine, and not enough sleep or self-care. And then the show comes to an end and suddenly they find themselves in a vacuum of that stimulation. And unfortunately, this type of abrupt stop is something that we as humans don't process very well. There are therapists who specialize in the impacts of retirement because to stop working has an incredibly negative impact on many people. And never mind retirement, film people experience this work stoppage over and over, and sometimes multiple times a year. And then of course we turn around and we do the opposite, which is to return to work. In an instant, we go back to that frenetic schedule and re-triggers your system into a state of overstimulation. Now add to that the worry and fear that comes along with this type of a situation that we're in today. And it's a really perfect storm for stress to take hold. Now, I'm not saying this to drag a large number of people on this call down, honestly, but this is Mental Health Week. And I do want to acknowledge that the many ways that we as humans respond to situations of uncertainty and trauma reactions come on quickly and often when and where we least expect them to. So I urge people to take note of the resources that Lorrie mentioned at Call Time Mental Health and don't hesitate to use and take care of each other. Engage with your coworkers as much as you can, reach out to each other regularly. If you notice someone's behavior has shifted, ask them if they're okay. Where the virus is concerned, the key to prevention is respecting each other's physical space, but the real trick will be to do that while still connecting with each other in ways that will protect our community against the impacts of isolation. And the silver lining in all of this situation is our workforce finding themselves getting some much needed rest and spending time with their families. And I hope that each of you are finding ways to lean into that part of our current situation. I want to address one of the questions that was sent in, and that's how is the gender parity and inclusivity being addressed in plans moving forward? The MPPIA committee met yesterday, and we discussed how our plans pre-COVID will be best moved forward in the coming months, given the situation. I think the success of the many online events, including this one, so many people are engaged in, speaks for itself. The DGC BC is hosting a pitch workshop for directors today that I stopped into to say hello earlier. And the number of people who are taking part are obviously reflective of the many people who are currently available, and that's not good news. However, there's another side to that, and that's that this health crisis will leave very few people who aren't at least somewhat familiar with this type of platform moving forward. And being able to bring people together in a physical space certainly has its major advantages, and I'm sure today we'd all love an opportunity to meet in person. I know I would. But the reality of being able to tap into people from all over the world and even combine an in-person meeting with some participants who might not otherwise be able to take part is pretty amazing. It opens up our horizons in a whole new way. And I believe that the work that we're doing on the equity and inclusion file will be a great benefactor of this new comfort level with technology. And I truly look forward to designing a more inclusive program for our work around diversity as a result of that. And finally, I want to touch on the many activities of the Motion Picture Community Initiative, or what we call the MPCI. And this group was formed in 2016 as a result of the huge swell in production volumes that we saw during that time, and the impact of those incredible volumes on our relationships with our municipal partners, as well as the many business owners and residents in whose homes and neighborhoods we work. The MPCI is engaged in a variety of different approaches to this work over time, including participating at community events, placing thank you ads in local papers, and hosting appreciation receptions for municipal liaisons to highlight how crucial their partnership is in our success. And today we find ourselves in a world where COVID is a focal point in everything we do, but this work hasn't stopped as a result of COVID. The MPCI continue to look for ways that we can engage with our municipal partners that will grow and strengthen these bonds. And we'll be ready to share whatever messaging is required to assure a smooth and safe return to location work in all our cities. And that, I think, is a great note on which to turn over the discussion to our esteemed colleague at the City of Vancouver, Branch Manager, Film and Special Events, Geoff Teoli.
Thank you, Kendrie. And I think it's great that you had the chance to hand over to me because as a former DGC member and 18 years as a location manager, you know, we've got to know each other really well. And I wanted to kind of just give you guys a little bit of background on me. Obviously, being from the film industry has been really helpful in moving over to the City of Vancouver. And I was also the Executive Director of Actsafe for 5 years prior to this. And it's really awesome to see Anand here representing that fabulous organization. And so it's with that lens, that industry experience and that health and safety perspective that I started my role here at the City of Vancouver about 1.5 years ago, and started some work on some pretty important initiatives that actually I think are going to turn out to be very, very helpful for us in this current situation. So I'm actually going to try and share my screen and a PowerPoint presentation with everybody. So we're going to take just a second here to do that. All right. Can you guys all see that? Awesome. Okay, great. So there's 3 things I'm going to quickly talk to you guys about. It's how we're aligning the work at the city with what the industry needs are, what some of that work is at a very high level, and some of the changes that can be expected when you return to the streets of Vancouver. So you've heard both today and last Friday a couple mentions of something called the Motion Picture Leadership Group, and I thought I'd take a minute just to quickly give you a bit of background on what that is. The Motion Picture Leadership Group is now a permanent structure within the City of Vancouver that allows for collaboration, long-term strategic collaboration with the industry. And this was something that actually the industry came to the city asking for, because in the past, most of this work had been done in an ad hoc nature. Throughout the years, every 3 to 5 years, some form of roundtable or task force had been established. We really wanted to kind of break that cycle of start and stop and get into something that was consistent and sustainable. And that's the Motion Picture Leadership Group. It's a approach that includes many of the people that you're seeing on these panels, with MPPIA kind of taking the lead in representing the industry from both the employers, the unions, studios, and other members of the association, as well as Creative BC as a voice for industry into the city. And from within the city, a different approach from the past, which was generally been an engineering-led initiatives, to really bring in senior leadership from all key areas of the City of Vancouver, from general managers and directors from not only engineering, but also planning, real estate development, Parks Board, Vancouver Economic Commission. It really is truly a high level, highly engaged group of people that can help not only develop, but also execute on strategic priorities. So that's the leadership group. Now let's talk about some of the things that we are working on and have been underway prior to the COVID crisis, but are areas where we can actually kind of really lean into and help out now. So for the last year, we've been working on launching a new online application system. We actually are trying to accelerate that to roll that out during this quiet period of time so that we can have it ready for when the industry comes back. A number of great features, process improvements, expediting and self-serve features, including contactless payment, will all be part of this new system. And so that's something we'll be able to have in place very soon. We're investing into power kiosks around the City of Vancouver, and this aligns with an initiative you may have heard of a few times over the last year, with the council approving a motion to try and help film industry reduce its reliance on diesel generators for a number of really important reasons. So that work is continuing, and we'll start to see if, those show up near the end of this year. The ultimate goal was there to be a network of these around the city of Vancouver that are all within 5 to 10 minutes of anywhere you could be filming. We had been planning to increase our staffing presence and our agility. And I put quotation marks around the word presence because originally it was meant to be physical presence, and I think we'll get there again one day. But in the meantime, all of our team has been set up for telecommuting and hosting web conferences. So we're really agile, and we'll be able to really make sure we're there for our clients and for the industry as soon as you guys are ready to come back. Reviewing guidelines and bylaws, another important piece of work, and in relation to what's happening right now, for example, looking at some of those practices. Bylaw reviews take a long time, but in the short term, guidelines and practices can be adjusted. For example, how we permit streets. For decades, we have been trying to get film companies to fit as much as they can into the smallest space possible. We realize that that's not going to work when you guys need elbow room and space to be safe and create distancing amongst the crews, and also in the interface to the public. So we're looking at those right now, and I'm in conversations with the departments to help us evaluate those and see what we can do to give you guys more space in our streets. And reducing the complexity of our fee systems and structures, and providing incentives. So, City of Vancouver currently has a kind of a complex and highly variable fee structure system. We're planning on launching new fees that, or new fee structures that make it a lot simpler to understand what the fees are and budget for them, so that when production managers and location managers are creating their budgets for filming in Vancouver, that the final invoice you get is a lot closer to what you expect it to be, and matches your PO, so that that will help out there. And also in the area of incentives, to incentivizing some of the things we talked about earlier in alignment with other city priorities, such as the green initiative and the climate emergency, incentives such as having clean energy incentives, or ultra low production incentives. For example, if a production crew can keep a small footprint with a small crew, we want to make sure that that there's a fee structure that is going to incentivize that. So finally, some of the things that you might see that are a bit different in coming into the city, and this is for Vancouver, probably similarly in other areas in the Lower Mainland. The big thing, and I think it's been mentioned throughout in a number of different contexts, is time. We're going to need more time to review your plans. There are other stakeholders sometimes involved in plans, whether that's the traffic departments or first responders, and they're all strained resources. So we want to make sure we give everybody enough time to think those things through. Community engagement and notification of residents is probably going to take a little longer. The days of dropping off and going door to door 2 days before filming are going to take a while to return to. So that means thinking ahead, being prepared and be able to communicate with the community early, and being able to help assure them that it's okay for a film industry to come back. It's okay for them to be on your block. We're going to have to allow some time to build that confidence and trust up. So, and creative problem solving. We are really open-minded to anything you bring to us that will help. But obviously, if there's the higher the creativity and the newer the suggestion, it will kind of back up to the first one. Take a little bit longer for us to review those plans. The other big thing is limiting traffic control, at least in the short term. I think everyone knows some of the strains that first responders are under right now, including the police. We've heard about a number of things that they're dealing with, not only in the downtown east side, but with crime, hate crime, and break and enters and such. They're also really trying to make sure their members are protected. They're exposed to situations where they may be exposed to COVID more often. They don't want to be exposed any more than they have to be. They also don't want to bring in that potential risk into any other environment like your set. So it's going to be a little bit more challenging to get the VPD resources out to help you out in the short term. That's going to mean a greater reliance on flaggers and other scenarios. Again, goes back to maybe that's a little bit more time for planning. And then also really kind of being mindful of the fact that there are many industries right now that are having to figure out their recovery from this. And when you're filming in business communities and areas, that to be mindful of those businesses that may be struggling as they come back and have their own recovery efforts, and how they may be impacted by your recovery efforts. BIAs and the business improvement associations are going to play a big role in that, helping to kind of be that bridge and engaging with them early on. And also, hopefully, encouraging the film industry to use the local services and local businesses in the area you're filming as much as possible to really kind of help each other out in the recovery. So that's kind of the end of my presentation, and looking forward to getting some questions at the end of this panel discussion. But for now, I'm going to pass this over to Dawn and stop sharing my screen. So yes, over to Dawn Thompson.
Great, thanks, Geoff, and to everybody who's joining us online. I wanted to start off by recognizing the amazing amount of work my co-panelists and the others at MPPIA, Creative BC, along with the studios and industry associations, are all putting into this organizing of a safe and steady return to work. This is taking a lot of time researching, meeting, and lobbying with the various levels of government and industry, and more often than not, it's on our own time. In the post sector, we work on a completely different timeline than much of physical production. On the picture side, dailies processing completely stopped on the day that filming stopped. Editorial crews worked for a few weeks to finish up what was already in the pipeline and where producers were able to provide notes. And most of these editorial crews were moved quickly to remote setups at home with the assistance of companies like ours. Picture finishing has also been one of the remaining bright spots for post houses, as many series and MOWs were still in progress and are now completed. But this accounts for only about 50% of our crews. The same is more or less true for sound. Sound editors have often been working remotely from home studios for years already, but ADR and final mixes require a large stage and crew and expectations for clients or talent to be able to attend. Animation and visual effects have had some similar opportunities to work for moving workers home and to work remotely, as they did not require physical production to continue to provide them content, since they already had original animation content or shots in their pipelines. But this has been done often at a heavy cost for new hardware and technological hurdles, including limited bandwidth for internet in many buildings. So sound, VFX, animation, and picture facilities have had to quickly invest in or invent new workflows for remote work from home solutions for our artists, editorial, and finishing crews. As well, new cloud-based solutions for review and approval of finished shows for clients located around the world have been introduced. But I think it's a testament to the dedication and entrepreneurial efforts of the people in our industry and working with a multitude of vendors that we found ways to figure these out, just as we did after the tsunami when it forced us to move to file-based delivery instead of tape. It also challenged studios and facilities to adapt security content processes to allow this work at home to continue. And we appreciate the openness of our partners to do this. Going forward, we're not likely to return to the way it was. Just as many of our workers have been able to maintain work to date, once that pipeline dries up, we will be the last to return to work. And potentially after assistance programs from the governments are already finished. So we're lobbying hard to ensure that lifelines remain for our workers as they wait to return. There will likely continue to be more remote editorial and animation work in the futures as companies try to maintain physical distancing in our studios. Client review and approvals will also likely continue to happen remotely or possibly in secondary studios in the facilities where possible, so that both our key talent and our clients can remain safe. But there's a price to this beyond the obvious physical one. It is also going to affect our ability to effectively collaborate in the studio. So we'll all need to learn new shorthand for creative direction and expectations while working remotely. But I believe in the workers in our industry, both in physical production and post, and that as we come out of the work stoppage, we'll find new ways to figure this out. And to start that process, we have formed a post-safety practices work group that will feed into the work that the Coalition, Actsafe, and Creative BC are doing. The work group is comprised of some of the leading editors, post supervisors, sound and picture facilities in BC. And our goal is to present standardized workplace solutions to lead us towards that safe return. Our first meeting for that group will be this coming Monday. I also wanted to go off script for a moment to reinforce what Phil Clapwick said last week about using this time for us all to get rest and upgrade our skills. It's a rare opportunity for us to be able to do this. So if you're in post, take the time to learn more about camera, lenses, sound, and other on-set techniques and equipment. If you're in physical production, take the time to learn Avid, Pro Tools, or Resolve and figure out how we process your work. Will help us all become better communicators about the production process in the future. And lastly, I encourage all of you to reach out to a coworker or others in the industry that might need support. One of the bright spots for me in the last few weeks was when Shawn Williamson picked up the phone, called me out of the blue just to check in. Our industry thrives on communication and teamwork, and without it, it can be lonely, anxious, or depressing as we struggle with the stress and the desire to get back to work in production and post. Thanks, and now I want to turn it over to Garin Josey at Whites International.
Thanks, Don. Great to be part of this panel and hear these updates from so many key industry stakeholders. It's an awesome situation to be part of. I'm happy to say I'm currently at the Whites Lougheed office. It's been a while since I've been here, and it feels good. Though I think we and other equipment suppliers have effectively been shut down to those on the outside, I can tell you from experience there has been a ton of work going on behind the scenes, looking at what role we are going to have to play on the other side of this. And that has involved a ton of engagement, both with local and LA-based decision makers, just in an attempt to not guess at what the world's going to look like, but really try to gain some important intel on what role we need to play as suppliers to ensure a safe set. So I feel that suppliers have a unique level of responsibility on the other side, because we touch so many productions in a single day. And personally, if I were a virus, I would want to be at a rental house, because that's going to be the best place to spread my wings in a very short period of time. So with that, we have to take our processes and protocols extremely seriously, and we have to look at everything, and it is a lot of work. But to summarize, I think what many are doing, I'll kind of put it into three pillars. First, we want to create a safe work environment, both for our staff and, of course, for production, crew, and clients that come in to our operations. We need to ensure that the equipment is properly sanitized, both upon its return and, of course, when it goes back out to the clients. And then, of course, adequate inventory. And I'll kind of drill down on these three areas a little bit more. But as far as the safe work environment, I think many of us are papering, and you've probably seen a few different guidelines and protocols coming through. They're papering kind of what that new world looks like in an operation such as a lighting and grip or camera supplier. That is, the workflow is going to be different. We're going to have to structure the entire experience to ensure that physical distancing is kept, both for the safety of our staff and for the production crews, while at the same time ensuring that we can pump out the amount of equipment that our clients will no doubt at one point want us to continue doing. So that is, there's a lot of, to make it simple, there's just a lot of work in behind there. But we're looking pretty good. We've got, I think, a number of companies coming out with phenomenal playbooks to that end that will be shared with clients and with their teams. So I'm confident that that process will be great. On the equipment sanitation, that is a big piece. For lighting and grip, for instance, there are thousands of pieces checked in and out on a single show. So we will look to, there's some amazing technology out there, sprayer systems, foggers, of course, in addition to the wipe down methods that we're doing, but we are drilling down and looking for the best ways to be able to do it effectively, but also efficiently. So a lot of work going in on that end. And on the equipment side for inventory, similar to us being in a unique situation as far as responsibility, we're also in a unique situation where we can really help with the recovery by supplying those items that our clients will require to ensure a safe set. So in many ways, we'll be looking at other technology, I'm sure, that will be coming out, but as of right now, you're going to be looking at hand sanitation systems that are portable, the hot and cold hand wash stations, air scrubber systems, of course, PPE, and being respectful of the frontline healthcare professionals. I'm sure we will be looking to secure a lot of non-medical PPE so that when those production teams come back, they can go to companies like White's and others to secure that PPE that's going to be required. And this is just to mention a few of the areas that suppliers can assist in. Of course, as mentioned, we've been reviewing a number of the documents that are coming through from different jurisdictions, as well as some from studios. We will be looking through those to ensure that we are in lockstep, obviously, with what our clients' guidelines will be, as well as pulling what we feel to be appropriate processes from the other guidelines that are coming out from the other jurisdictions. I guess to say it's been a strange time would be an understatement, but out of adversity comes strength. So I feel that we will come out of this stronger and ready to play our role in creating content for the world. On that note, I'm going to pass it over to producer Shawn Williamson.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Garin. Couple things. I've been tasked to be realistic, but also very positive by Peter on this. So as producers of studio and independent production, we face some challenges above and beyond what we're going to all face on set. It's how do we get to set is really the next step for everybody. The government announcements on Wednesday were awesome for the film industry, because Hollywood's been watching British Columbia and the numbers and the low numbers we've had with keen interest. And so we're set now to, I think, take advantage of that. Hollywood, New York, London are all looking at BC as an awesome opportunity. And so the plans that Dr. Bonnie Hendry put in place effectively to keep everybody safe and mitigate the exposure and the spread will pay off not only for our industry, I assume, but every industry out there, assuming we can maintain the low numbers we have. We'll see a very, very quick return this summer, we're hoping, for physical production. The shows, we shut down at our company 7 shows. All 7 of those shows are eager to return. And when we have plans as early as July shoots, and some, the later ones are October. So those are specific dates we're dealing with. And, on the positive side, it's nice that we've got at least a chance to be shooting, assuming that, everybody within the province are continuing to, play by the rules, that we have a good chance to return to physical production once all these, are these new protocols for set and suppliers and back room and hotels and everything are set in place. And, so to get into a little bit of the weeds, because our company does both studio productions and independent production, the indies, studio, both see unique challenges, but the indies have a very unique set of challenges going forward in how you finance your show if you are dealing with COVID insurance, like insurance in the COVID world, completion bonds, and then bank financing. The first 2 things lead to the last one. Typically in financing an independent show, television or feature, you sell your show, you raise money at different outlets, take that to a bank and finance it. With a COVID carve out, the banks, the insurance companies, and the bond companies are going to be looking for our plans should there be a shutdown and to still deliver a show on budget. That's probably the biggest challenge the independents will face, is how do you actually close financing on a show that has carve-outs. We're not exactly sure yet, but all these protocols will provide us the tools to mitigate that. And if that mitigation is such that it makes the banks and the bond companies happy, we'll be able to go into production very quickly. whether that's domestic or a foreign, a UK or US based foreign production, we're all financing the same way and we all face the same struggles. The reality of that is that that's an international problem. That doesn't simply exist here, that exists everywhere. So, you know, as we build the new normal in physical production, we need the studios may likely be the first shows coming back. There will be a number of shows that will also come back very quickly that we're shooting and had to shut down and have full insurance in place that includes COVID insurance. So those shows may very likely return to production quickly. And we are receiving, like the Film Commission, and I'm sure every other producer in British Columbia, many calls about, with people showing interest in shooting here. So hopefully that will be, we'll see evidence of quick returns very, very quickly. To go into a couple of things, I've seen a lot of emails and suggestions that producers and studios need to guarantee safety on set in the new COVID world. Well, certainly in the film industry, we strive to be safe always. I don't know that there never was a guarantee of safety on set, and I don't know that there will be a guarantee of COVID security on set. All of these protocols will mitigate the exposure, we hope, but I think people have to be aware that a guarantee of COVID protection may not exist. And some of this will be in how we bring foreign workers in. I think British Columbia generally is very safe, but as we begin to bring people in from out of province, that may slightly change the risk here. And as Lorrie said earlier, we do need to see a big cultural shift in people muscling through and and coming to work sick. I mean, growing up for me in live theater, there were no sick days. You showed up at work, you did your job sick or not, because there were no options. We didn't have backups. There were so few of us working on a show that you had to show up. That world and those policies are done. So, and we will need workers to be very quick to notify their supervisors and us and such if they are sick, and ideally not even come to work that day. And that's going to be a significant cultural change, I think, in what we're dealing with. I'm going to try to burn through a few of the questions that were online quickly, just to try to knock off some of these things practically. Our location departments have been calling the locations we'd set for a number of the shows just to gauge the temperature to see if there would be an appetite to have us return. We really weren't sure. Every location has said yes, they would like us to return. I think that the economic hardship everybody's seen, top to bottom, is partially underneath that. But I think that they know that the industry will come in safe and will work within their protocols and using ours to shoot safely on location, whether it's a business or home, with some big carve-outs. I don't think anybody will be shooting in real hospitals. And luckily on a show like Good Doctor, we've built a big one. But real hospitals will be offline. Care homes, of course, will be offline. There'll be a number of things that you might have otherwise shot in that will not be on the table until we get a handle on that. There's been a lot of talk about quarantining an entire cast and crew in a hotel or a floor of a hotel, sort of the Tyler Perry model, where he has an Air Force base, an Army base, where he has suggested that he could quarantine a few hundred people who would come on for the duration of a shoot, stay and live with that, within the confines of the base, not leave. That works very well if you have a military base. We don't have one of those, at least at our company. So the opportunity to actually quarantine and enforce that, I don't think is a practical plan. I think that the safety measures will effectively deal with that. Every show, at least every show we're working on, and I'm sure every show everybody else is working on, is creating show-specific protocols that will layer on top of the protocols that will come out of the government organizations and the MPPIA and union task forces. So things like Good Doctor happily have hand sanitizing stations built into our set. Very, very easy for us to keep that full and working. Many of our stages are being converted to have hand washing stations in place of paint sinks. So we'll replace sinks with usable sinks for people to hand wash. All of these protocols will come in and are pretty easy to implement. And really, some of our shows are 100% location. And as Garin said, there are going to be new supplies of hand washing trucks and sanitation, portable sanitation things that will come in to help augment things on a show specific way. There was a question about whether or not we'll see smaller crews. And I think that there may be smaller crews, but I think right now we don't have anywhere near the information we need to determine that. We may also see larger crews. I think that, you know, the requirement for us to clean our gear, sanitize and clean locations and, you know, common set surfaces will mean an increase in crew and, you know, well-distanced and safe crew. But the protocols that will kick in may need new people, and I don't know which department. Likely every department will participate in that. You know, the grips will clean their gear, the electricians will clean their camera, and so on and so forth. There was a question as to how things might work differently on Canadian content or co-production or small indies. I think the protocols are going to be effectively the same everywhere. Everybody will see an increased cost in cleaning and PPE and such that will impact the studio shows in the same way as the independents, because the risk of transmission is ultimately the same everywhere. I don't think we'll see a rollout in production. There was a question about whether we would see things quickly roll out or slowly roll out, sorry, and that, you know, 1 or 2 shows will come out and test the waters. I think that you will see a very quick return for production once we have protocols in place. That and one of the bigger changes we're going to need for that is, the border has not closed to foreign workers. There is just a protocol for bringing them in and working around the quarantine and such to provide safe people, having people come in and mitigate their potential exposure elsewhere and having that come in to us here. So I think there's also a misconception that the border has been shut down to our industry. It is not. On one of our shows, we did bring somebody in a few weeks ago while the borders were effectively closed. But if you have a permit and a reason to be here, then you can cross the borders, assuming you work within all the protocols that exist currently. And I think that we will see I've said this already, but we will see a rush of shows to British Columbia because we've been so good. There was a question about paperless work and paperless call sheets and accounting and such, start slips. I think we will see it's going to be slower, but we will absolutely see a drive towards a more paperless driven production, which is great for the green world, but studios are always concerned about how things can be shared. And so we'll have to deal with online security around that, but we will absolutely see more paperless work or more paperless production. There was a question around visitors and interns and such on set. I think no set will welcome visitors or interns for a period of time until we are absolutely safe. So I think every protocol I've read has said there will be no visitors on set and that it will be simply limited to people working, and even to the point where we're talking about office staff not visiting set and vice versa. Set crew stay on set and don't come up, where you create pods, effectively an office pod, a circus pod with Teamsters and ADs that stay there. And so I think these sort of things will, and a lot of these will fall out of what happens in the protocols that are going to come out from the committees. But I think that we will see a quick return as soon as we can come up with some sort of safe protocol that we can present to government, and then convince the studios and obviously all of our performers and crew that we have a safe environment to return to. Anyway, on that note, Peter, back to you, I think.
Well, thanks very much, Shawn, and thanks for your practical insights in answering some of those questions. We will have a few more questions. I'd like to thank the entire panel for all the work they've done on behalf of the industry and for their continued work. We did have questions submitted by the audience, and so really appreciate that. We do really appreciate the input from the people on the ground that are doing a lot of the work, because it's the practical solutions that really make sense to us going back. And again, there's a lot of work and a lot of feedback from a lot of different crew and cast members in terms of our safe return. Okay, let's get to some questions. Our first question is, what initiatives are being considered to prepare the public for location scouting and management? And why don't I start with Marnie in this, and others can chime in.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I'll say a little bit about that, and I think Kendrie probably has some follow-up. I spoke to it a little bit in terms of my time earlier. We're going to be working very closely with the location teams, both in with the guild and the commercial industry, and also taking a lot of direction from our municipal film offices. We have a municipal film office advisory committee that one of our team members at the Film Commission helps run, Catherine Pavoni, and we're going to be looking to them for guidance as well, and certainly working with the municipal film offices in terms of that external facing document and making sure that we are assuring people that the motion picture industry has safe health and safety protocols in place. And that we are alongside the other industries in the province that are working, like construction and agriculture and manufacturing and retail, hospitality, alongside of this, some of which have continued to work and have come up with health and safety protocols for COVID. So I think we want to make sure that the public understands that we are a job site and that we do have health and safety protocols, and we'll be able to communicate that clearly to them. But I'm going to hand it over to my fabulous colleague, Kendrie, if she has any follow-up to that.
Thanks, Marnie. Thanks, Marnie. Yeah, I agree with everything that Marnie said, and I'd say that it will be a combination of approaches. It will include a lot of planning and a lot of communication. Certainly it's absolutely key when a location scout knocks on a person's door that they be equipped to assure those residents that there's a guideline and that's going to be followed. And we know that that guideline is being developed by the coalition that Marnie is ably chairing. And I can imagine a toolkit that will provide locations with sort of the type of information that people will need to be comfortable with the proposed activities. But I agree 100% also with what Shawn was saying, that I think BC is well known certainly by locations that are used, more than once, to be a very safe place to be a location and to be used. So I think that we will capitalize on that perspective and that reputation, I'd call it. I'm also going to share that several of us were on a call with Mayor Stewart yesterday, and we really emphasized the importance of the City of Vancouver and of course all of the municipalities coordinating and collaborating on our messaging as things begin to restart. Our municipalities they're where our residents look for reassurance of how they'll be protected and cared for when there are activities such as filming, as someone said earlier, on their block. And so it's key that those lines of communication are kept open and that they're used effectively. Touching on the group that Geoff was talking about, the Motion Picture Leadership Group, that's a great opportunity. It's just another example of existing infrastructure that's been pre-built and is now able to be tapped into as we move through this. And that's exactly why you want that kind of infrastructure in place. And I have to say, I was a location manager for 30 years. And I truly, truly believe that our relationships overall with municipalities, with the province, and with all of our stakeholders are better and more functional now than they've ever been before. So I think we can rely on that, and I feel very confident moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Kendrie, and thanks, Marnie, for that. Question number 2, what do you need municipalities to do to enable filming? Is there a gap that the film office can fill? Geoff, why don't you take that one?
Okay, yeah. So I think it leads into a little bit what's been said already too, but I think there's a couple of things. One, really important, just to make sure the message is out there that we're open for business, that the film offices, we're here, we never went away, and that when the industry's ready to come back, we're able to respond quickly. So, make sure that messaging stays there, that we're open and accessible. There's been a lot of talk about building that confidence and reassuring the public. I don't think there's much more to be said there, although I think perhaps the potential gap is in the area of what can the city's leadership do to advocate for it. So for example, I was really pleased to hear that there was that call with the mayor yesterday where the mayor offered to kind of help champion some of the industry's messaging to other levels of government, whether that's to other mayors here in the region or at the federal level. So I think that's one of the things we can do is help provide our elected leaders with information that they may need to be able to do that. And I think, the alignment, I talked a little bit about the work that we're doing on reviewing some of our practices and some of our guidelines. one of the things the industry really does need is for us to try and be as closely aligned as possible as they go across the different municipalities on a production. You know, they could be working in dozens of different productions over a course of one project. So keeping in touch and through that process, especially, which is led by a whole bunch of great work done by Creative BC to keep the municipalities in touch with each other and collaboration. So I think really kind of what it boils down to is that everything that we said we needed to do that was important before is still important now, and to not pull back from that, but actually to lean into it. That it's all the priorities are the same. They're even more important now, and so let's just keep at it and really lean into it.
Great, thanks, Geoff. Here's a question for Laurie Ward. Laurie, what are some of the safety protocols going to look like for drivers, including cast drivers and others? And what are the issues that need to be addressed?
Hi, I still see you, Peter, but I guess it's me. I think it's a really good question. I'm not sure it can be fully answered at this point because of the distancing that we're still trying to, to figure out. Certainly the relationship between a cast driver and cast is pretty significant, and there's a lot of trust there in many different levels. That opening conversation with everybody wearing a mask will be odd in itself. I had a recent conversation, one of the providers of rental cars, and they're assuring that that they have a whole new protocol for the cleaning of the vehicles. So we have our cast vehicles, our crew vehicles for transporting crew, and of course the transportation vehicles and trucks that move the equipment every day. So all three of those, we're going to have to develop protocols on how to clean them properly. Going back to the interaction and the close proximity with cast and crew, I'm going to cringe a little bit on this, but it's almost like the equivalent of practicing safe sex is that you're going to have to pretty much assume that that person might have COVID-19. So I think at this point, that's how you'd have to engage it. Certainly at the airport, watching one of the news. The news hour was talking about how they're wiping down in between every, the limousines as they deliver. But if you're going to have someone come in from quarantine, that's going to be quarantined for 14 days, as the driver said, well, what about me? So those are the things that I'm sure we can work out. But those are, until we really know how close in proximity we can be, you'll know how many people per seat. We can have a 15-passenger van and have 8 people in it possibly, just a number thrown out there. But I think part of the thing that caused that is just the thought of having 2 people per van would be virtually impossible. So a good question. I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea, but certainly I'll refer back to our members that do it regularly to get their input on that. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Laurie. Okay, here's a question for Laurie Stevens. Will there be, and this question came up quite a bit, will there be new regulations to make it more acceptable to take sick days? And this applies to cast or crew. So, Laurie?
Yeah, it's actually been really encouraging to hear Premier Horgan and Dr. Henry repeatedly sort of recognize the importance for having paid sick days and the idea of not having workers feeling like they're obligated to go to work because they need the money. I think in the past, many employers have seen sick pay as a cost they can't afford. And you don't want to have to pay somebody to be at home. You want to pay them for doing their work. Clearly, COVID-19 has been a complete game changer. Not only can a single individual with a slightly sore throat or a slight fever come in and not be capable of working, it practically could take out your entire workforce or shut down your production or your city or your province. So I think the province has quickly recognized that. And I think many employers throughout the province of British Columbia have also recognized that. So I think it's a very important conversation that we are willing to absolutely willing to engage in. And I think whether it's mandated or not by the province, I mean, eventually it may need to be that way for the benefit of all industry workers across BC. But there's nothing to stop individual employers from voluntarily enacting that now or taking that on as part of a safe return to work procedure, and preventing people who are going to desperately need the work coming to work when maybe they shouldn't. So I definitely look forward to engaging in some of these conversations and working with the government and working with our industry partners on this. But I would certainly encourage any employers, not just in our industry, but in the province, to just consider this now as something that can be workable to get many businesses back more safely and hopefully avoid a continuation of this pandemic or a second or third wave.
Thanks, Lorrie. I've got a question for Anand. As an employer, how do I ascertain whether the safety protocols I am contemplating that are within the provincial health guidelines will be acceptable for those working on a production?
Well, good question. And I can answer that by saying this is exactly what the COVID-19 coalition is working towards. So each individual employer, yes, they have to provide that policy of how they would go back into production in a safe way that aligns with what is laid out by the provincial health officers. But the document that we're creating will hopefully give that guidance so that they don't have to submit plans to the health authorities or even to WorkSafe BC, because the fact of the matter is that those agencies will not look at your health plan or your plans and give you the okay to go ahead. That's what we're here for. So it's, like I said, once that document has been completed, it'll be sent up to the government for their approval. They'll take a look at it, and we can use that as a foundation to launch from in developing specific programs or specific policies for each and every employer. And if beyond that, if there is any consultation that employers do need, they can always contact us at Actsafe. And that's one of the things that we do, is we look not only at specific policies, but we can help look at an entire occupational health and safety program and ensure that it meets the criteria as laid out by WorkSafe BC and by all other provincial regulatory authorities. So that's something that we can do at Actsafe for sure. But beyond that, yeah, it's like I said, a great question. It's something that is being dealt with at the coalition level, and yeah, as long as you fit within those things, what you put forth as a policy will be acceptable and should be safe for everybody on your productions to go back to work to.
Okay, thanks, thanks, Anand. It looks like the Zoom gods are looking at our time or something, but so why don't we wrap it up then? I'd really, first of all, like to thank again our panelists. We are continuing working on all those issues that you did bring up in your questions, and we're confident that working together we'll come up with a comprehensive, safe return to work. I'd again like to thank our panel for their continuing contributions and thank our audience for taking the time to participate in the town hall. We've not really set a date of our next town hall, but we will be watching developments over the next couple of weeks. So just stay tuned, and we'll certainly try and keep you informed as best we can. I'd like to now turn this back to Marnie Orr, BC Film Commissioner, with some final comments. Marnie.
Thank you so much, Peter. I do have a couple of closing comments. I just wanted to reiterate that all of this conversation about the COVID-19 coalition, it is up on our website, and it will be up on some of the other members of the coalition website. But just to give you a sense of who is actually on this, it is experts and people that have been working in the industry a long time, and it's all of our partners in British Columbia and our stakeholders. So we have the BC Council of Unions, the Directors Guild BC, we have the Commercial Association and ACFC, Actsafe, of course, WorkSafe BC, Warner Brothers, Disney, HBO. We've got health and safety reps, representation from contract services and AMPTP, Sony 669, of course, as part of the Council of Unions, IATSE Canada, and we also have post representation from Deluxe, Company 3, and Finale, and myself at Creative BC. I'm just reading this, and of course UBCP, ACTRA, etc. So it really is representation of BC's motion picture industry, and it is the reason why the province feels confident that this group will be able to deliver health and safety protocols that's going to match what WorkSafe has laid out for other industries as well. So just in closing, I want to thank all of my fellow panelists and colleagues, and everyone watching today, that you've taken the time to tune in to all of us for the last hour and a half. I think it's going to be posted to MPIA's website. I want to thank MPIA for putting these on, and we'll continue to put them on, and also to the Canadian Media Producers Branch of BC, and also for Canada, because we're working closely with their counterparts in Ontario and across Canada, and also to the Commercials Producers Association of Western Canada. I'm so used to just saying CPOC and MPIA and CMPA, and also specifically as well to all of the labor organizations that we have here in British Columbia. And we know that the health and safety of their members is paramount. And I'm extremely grateful to have the relationships that I do with all of them. A lot of us go way back to physical production and worked on set together, decades ago. So I think it's going to be really helpful in terms of that collaborative spirit that we have here in BC, and it's going to help us get the job done. I want to thank the province for recognizing the importance of this sector and its workforce to the economy in British Columbia. And I also want to thank Honorable Lisa Bear, Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture, who's provided a message specifically to this sector today that's going to be up on our website. So we'll be posting that today and sharing it on our newsletter and policy partners there as well. So thank you for allowing time for Creative BC and for our update, and for me to be a part of this. And I look forward to talking with everyone again.
Thanks, Marnie. And thanks everyone for attending. So we'll look forward to the next session. Bye now.